All right. Hello and welcome to this episode. So, my name is Matt Cotty, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in helping people with OCD and anxiety. And today, I wanted to do an episode that is a little different than what I normally do on this show. And I want to talk about labels. And the reason is because, as while most of when we think about OCD and anxiety, we think about it from a very internal standpoint, right? We think about it from the idea of I'm feeling this, I'm thinking this, and I'm doing these behaviors to resolve my own internal distress. A lot of us don't see how that happens on a grander society scale, and more importantly, like the things that we will do sometimes without even realizing it, or the things we can be influenced to do sometimes, I should say. And what I want to talk about right now is the labels. Well, let's talk first about just like the labels we put on ourselves, right? And how powerful that is. If because essentially a label, what we're doing is we're taking on an identity. Identity is just a story about yourself. And so to help us as humans, what we do is we often try to resolve, like the human experience, and to try to make sense of it, we label things, right? We label as, man, woman, right? White, black, right? We, ethnicities, cultures, Republican, Democrat, religious, non-religious, atheist, believer, Christian, Muslim, Jew, we throw on all these labels, right? And it's an attempt to really conceptualize ourselves. And at the end of it, it's just a story we tell ourselves in many ways. And for many of us on a grander level, we're way beyond our labels as people. Right? A label is just our sense, our attempt to conceptualize this experience that we're all having. But the problem with labels is that if we believe them, then what happens is we live to them, right? And we develop beliefs about those identities and labels, and then we engage in behaviors to protect those. So this is why, if you ever why they have rules like don't discuss politics or religion at bars, right? Well, the reason being is because when you're in a discussion about one of those things, it's very rare that two people are ever going to actually have a discussion about that. It's very rare. I know you might be like, well, I've had many discussions about that. And it's like, well, have you? Because, and let's put that to the challenge for a second, because what happens in those is that you have an identity and the other person has an identity. And it might be like, let's just use the idea of I'm Christian and I'm an atheist. And you have that harbored identity that you're locked into, right? And atheists believe certain things and Christians believe certain things above that, right? So you have these stories and foundational beliefs, and then you have these topics that we bring into all this above it, right? On the surface. This is the surface conversation that we have up here. But underneath that, we have our core beliefs, and then more importantly, our identities. And what we do is, instead of trying to talk about a topic together and learn from each other and to engage in active discussion and growth together, what we do is we're actually protecting our beliefs and identities. This explains how you can literally have like evidence to the contrary of what someone believes, and they will just reject it and ignore it and just diminish it like it's nothing, right? And just completely avoid it in many ways, because it's not that they don't care about the evidence, but what if that evidence is real and it challenges their beliefs and identities, what they have to do is they have to reconstruct themselves. Because in so many of us, instead of trying to evolve ourselves and help ourselves grow, what we're committed to doing is protecting ourselves. We're protecting our identities, our self-concepts, I should say, not ourselves. So this is why these controversial topics, some of them being like gun control, abortion, right, healthcare, immigration, right, like these topics, people are rarely talking about these topics with the intent of actually resolving them. What they usually are doing is saying, well, my side believes this, or my side believes this, and so what we're going to do is we're going to, and because they believe this and that's who I am, right, I need to protect this idea. Because if this idea is wrong, then this belief might be wrong, then my identity might be wrong, and I need to reconstruct myself, and I don't want to do that work. It's too messy, right? And this is the problem on its simplest context here, and the danger of it too, right? I'm watching, and again, this is a little bit off brand. Like I said, this is not um, normally episodes about this, but I was watching, what was going on in the media recently with Nicki Minaj, and I'm not particularly a Nicki Minaj fan. I don't follow her, but don't know what she's up to, and I know her songs, and that's about it. It's just there's an indifference. I'm just not her particular avatar, so to speak. But she tweets out something and just asks people to kind of and just with the idea of thinking for yourself, with this idea of vaccinated and getting vaccinated when it comes to COVID-19, which again is a personal decision that all of us are faced with right now. Some people have gotten it, some people haven't. Okay. And what I want you to watch, though, this is important, right? I want you to watch how labels are getting created for people and identities are getting created for people off of one decision. One decision. People say, oh, they're an anti-vaxxer or they're vaccinated, right? Like that's who they are as a person. That is the wildest thing that I am watching right now in our society. And it's scary. It's scary. How could you ever reduce a person to a decision they make about putting something, like getting a vaccine? And then what happens is that there's these belief structures that because vaccinated people or unvaccinated people have these certain beliefs, and in these beliefs, I have to be right? Like my beliefs are right because I have this identity and my side believes this or whatever it is. And then therefore there's these extreme conflicts, or more importantly, the dehumanization of people that I'm watching happen. And it's just kind of like, if you don't see that as an issue, like it's time to step back for a second and really look at it. Because where this goes potentially is very, very scary. And now, again, I'm not particularly on one side of the fence or the other on it, if I'm really just transparent. Like I don't have a super strong stance because, again, I know I see the complexities of both sides. Like this is not an issue that's like, oh, hey, this side's 100% right, this side's 100% right. Like I understand arguments being made from both sides. I really do. But what's scarier to me is to watch how quickly I've seen family members of that I have label people, oh, they're an anti-vaxxer. It's like, what? Like that's who they are. That's the whole of their being right there. You don't know anything else about them, or you don't know why they're making that decision. And instead of challenging yourself, or it's like they're pro vaccine. They won't let someone into their shop if they're not vaccinated, so they're a terrible person too, right? Like other side, right? And it's like, okay, well, instead of just taking this one behavior they have, this one idea they have, this one choice they made, and encompassing their identity around it, maybe we should start to try to understand their story a little bit from a broader context. And maybe what even it would be better to do is to understand why we are so identified with something that, let's say, a year ago didn't exist. I want you to see how these labels have been created within a year. This idea of vaxxed and unvaxxed wasn't a thing a year ago, and we've created, and I want you to see the division it's caused. And I even want you to see like media outlets using things like, we need to do something with this particular group of people. Like that's scary language. That is scary language. And if you're a part of that in any way, the way that we can address this together is not by just following what someone else tells you. This is when I started Restored Minds. The whole idea is when we start to begin restore the mind as the individual, right, and heal the individual, what that enables us to do is heal within. And if we can heal within, that can be spread without into families, into communities, into societies, and eventually the whole world even. But it starts with you as the individual. It always does, always has, always will. And if you aren't attuned to your identities that you're locked into and your belief structures that you have, and more importantly, the behaviors that follow as a result of that, and if you're talking about ideas about and dehumanizing people one way or the other, and because instead of really understanding and even being willing to challenge your own stuff, right? That's why like the real work is always within. If you don't like something outside of you, instead of assuming that it's actually outside of you, ask yourself, what's within me that's causing me not to like this? Like, and this happens with people all the time, right? We project so much of our stuff outside of us because we don't want to look within. The last thing anyone wants to do is challenge an identity structure that they have, because it's easier just to believe that you're right. It is easier just to believe you're right. And the problem is that rarely are we right 100%. I can look back in essentially every aspect of my life, even this right now. Like I will look back on at some point and realize areas that I'm not 100% right, even what I'm saying right now. And that's my job. That's my constant refinement, is to always look at myself and see where I can improve. What can I let go of from an identity perspective and a belief structure to allow me to see this much more objectively? And more importantly, if I'm looking at someone and making judgments about them based off a decision, I mean, that is like based off anything. If I'm looking at one aspect of someone and making a whole conclusive assessment of that person, that is scary if I'm doing that. And if you're doing that, it should be scary to you as well. Whatever that is. If it's someone's race, if it's someone's sexual orientation, if it's someone's choice on, a medical thing, right? If it's someone's political affiliation, and you just make a wholehearted judgment about who that person is, and then you make behaviors around that judgment, you see what that's going to lead to? And then again, it does not matter what side you're on this. This is not this is the right side, this is the wrong side, right? Because again, there's arguments for both. But what I want you to see is, what behavior are you engaging in based on your identities and beliefs? And are you someone who's perpetuating hate and bad things into the world? Are you? This is all the question you need to ask yourself. It starts with you. It starts with you as an individual. And this is the only work that I have to do on myself. Is that I have to look at myself. That's where my day begins and ends. And again, I'm not perfect, and I'll never claim to be, right? But when I'm watching the idea of like statements being made like this is a problem of this specific group of people, and reducing everyone to that identity, the dehumanization of people is what has led to terrible atrocities in the history of humanity. And you don't need to do much research to show yourself that. So you have to ask yourself, if you're dehumanizing people, you need to realize where the next step or the next 3 steps are going to lead to that. And again, if we as individuals can start to look at ourselves better and in a more healthy way and more constructive way, then what can happen is we can begin to see other people in a much healthier and constructive way. Because if we can first do the work on ourselves, then we can begin to open ourselves up enough to have real authentic dialogue with people. This is the thing. We're not even having dialogue at this point. Like the division that I'm watching happen in our world. And again, this is like families and brothers and sisters and husbands and wives and friends and people that have been friends for lifelong. Like I'm watching this division occur, and it's sad. It's sad because it doesn't have to. And one of the ways that division is caused is by getting people afraid. Okay. And because when people are afraid, that's when you're activating a part of the brain that's subconscious and sublingual, and people are trying to resolve their fear as opposed to doing what they think they're really doing. That's the big illusion that a lot of people get caught in, is that when we're trying to resolve fear, what we're really doing is all internal, and we're just trying to change the external so we feel okay inside. And this is what happens with fear, with phobias, with OCD, with anxiety, right? And it's not any different right now. If you're afraid of something, chances are you're not looking at that thing objectively. Okay. And I mean, there's an overwhelming probability, in fact, that you're not looking at that thing objectively. And so when we talk about what the work you can do on yourself is, if you're looking outside and trying to change things outside of you, it's the worst place you can start, because chances are you're operating from identity structures and belief structures that you're just trying to protect, so you don't have to do the work of looking at yourself. The number one best thing that everyone can do, as opposed to pointing the finger or pointing the blame or getting angry with people outside of them, trying to change people outside of them, is to look at themselves. Do an honest look. And most of us aren't going to like what we see if we really took the deep dive to go into every aspect of our life. And what we're going to realize is there's plenty of work to be done on yourself. And once you've mastered yourself, then you can start working on the people you care about, right? And working with them, right? And then moving forward from there. But if you guys think, how successful have you been in tweeting out hate messages and getting people to change? Sending hateful text or hurtful text, dehumanizing people, calling them names, criticizing their choices, right? How successful does that get the result that you want? And odds are none, because again, hate just begets hate, right? It just is a terrible way to fear, just promotes more fear. And fear drives choices that oftentimes lead us to do things that we can't undo, in a very bad way. And so, this episode this week, I felt compelled to talk about this just because, I don't really get into politics, and especially on this show, right? I mean, it's kind of off brand for what we do, but the stress that this is promoting and the anxiety this is promoting within a lot of people is just at a point now where it can't be unaddressed anymore, right? Like, it's part of it. And if we want to talk about solutions, the solution is always within. It's not without. It's not without. It's not outside of you. It's not about getting someone outside of you to do something so you feel okay inside. Your goal should be to feel okay inside, regardless of your environment in many ways. Because if you're at the whim of your environment, then you're always going to try to change your environment. And this is the same thing with OCD, right? It's like we have to master ourselves first before we go on to trying to influence and persuade others. And the more and more we can do that work, myself included, the more we can heal as individuals, the more we can heal as families, the more we can heal as communities and societies. And if you really want unity and healing, you got to start with you and ask yourself how you're helping that or how you're hurting that. What kind of language do you communicate to other people? I mean, just start there. How do you talk to people? What do you send out on social media? What do you say to your friends? How do you talk about people behind their back? How do you label people? That's a really good question for yourself. Because if you're labeling yourself, or if you're labeling other people and you're reducing people and dehumanizing them, what's the next step after that? Where does it go? Take a little stroll down history lessons and see where that goes. And the reason I'm saying this is because it's like a lot of things that happen right now are kind of scary. And if we don't start addressing it as individuals, like right now, where we could be in a place where, is not good. So I know this was an episode where, again, not on our normal topic. And, if you chose to be with me and this far in the episode. I really appreciate you staying with. And again, any comments, ideas, please, post them up. Let me know. You know what I mean? Get feedback is always welcome. Next week we are going to shift back into talking a little bit about exposure response prevention. But I just wanted to take the time to talk about that this week, because I think that all of us, if you're seeing the division and you don't like it, instead of trying to solve the division outside of you, look within and how you're causing it. And if we all worked from that place, I think we would get exponentially better results as people, as families, as communities, as countries, and even as the world. So, anyways, that's all I have for today. Wanted to say thanks so much for tuning in. And again, we always have resources for you at restoredminds.com if you are struggling with OCD, anxiety, and stress-related disorders. And with that said, I wish you guys a wonderful weekend. And I hope you guys have a great week. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for watching that video. And so if you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training for you over at Restored Minds, where you can start learning how to use our AAA response to really break out of that loop and ultimately take back control of your life. And all you need to do to access is just click the little link below and you'll be taken to a page where you can register today. Thank you so much.